This is CKDU 88.1 FM in Halifax, Nova Scotia. We're streaming online at www.ckdu.ca. This is Non-Duality Talk for November 4th, 2015. Our website is nonduality.org. I'm Jerry Katz. This is a review and an introduction to an extraordinary website, theculturium.com. And it's described as a compendium of all things timeless, wise, and beautiful. Paula Marvelli is the creator, writer, and editor of the Culturium. She has spent many years writing about spirituality, culture, and the arts. Paula has a BA with honors degree in English from the University of London and has a postgraduate Master of Philosophy research degree in European Studies from the University of Cambridge. I like this website, the Culturium. I like it a lot for a couple of reasons. Primarily, it's a kind of a delightful and rewarding aesthetic experience as a whole. The website design, the writing, the topics presented. And I also like it because all the contributions to the Culturium bear on Advaita, or the non-dual way of perceiving the world or oneself or existence. That is, as ultimately non-separate, even while each creation is standing out shining, to use the words of Christopher Alexander. And there's the paradox of non-duality, that while all things are non-separate, each thing stands out shining on its own. Paradox is the hallmark of non-duality, and there is never a single final answer or a conclusion, a way, or a final understanding. We remain in paradox, yet artistically, in some timeless, wise, and beautiful way, as Paula says, we are handed this paradox. We come to know it as mystery, and we fall into it. And in doing so, we experience ourselves in a more spacious way. And this spaciousness, we might find, possesses attributes of wholeness and healing. And I want to show how the Culturium is both an aesthetic and a non-dual experience. And to do that, I'm going to tell you in some more detail what the Culturium is about, and then we'll look at some of the articles Paula has written for the Culturium. And Paula Marvelli writes, the Culturium explores the interface between spirituality and the cultural arts. It is devoted, therefore, to showcasing the compositions of writers, filmmakers, artists, performers, musicians, philosophers, sages, and poets who have delved deep into silence within and created work that is timeless, wise, and beautiful. The Culturium is divided into 5 main categories. Literature is one of them, and I'll be looking at the article Paula wrote on Jack Kerouac. Film and video is another one, and Terrence Malick will be featured for that category. Visual arts is another one. Ansel Adams I'll be looking at. Performing arts. And for that classification, I'll look at Upahar, a musician that Paula Marvelli filmed in India. Wisdom is the 5th category, and any of the people, all the people I'll be reviewing, looking at today, could be placed in the wisdom category, of course. So to clarify, Paula Marvelli has written an article for each of these people that I'll be talking about, and for many more creative souls on the Culturium.com. Paula Marvelli's articles are really more like sketches that include her own understandings, a few relevant photographs, perhaps audio or video clip, and quotations from the person being studied. And each sketch is a crafted gem, as is the whole website of the Culturium.com. Jack Kerouac was from Lowell, Massachusetts. His parents immigrated from Quebec, Canada. Kerouac went to Columbia University on a football scholarship, but following an injury, he quit football and dropped out of Columbia. And there in New York City, he met Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs, and others who became the nucleus of the Beat generation in the 50s and even the late 40s. And though he's best known for his novel On the Road, Kerouac wrote many more novels, and He died in 1969 at the age of 47 of cirrhosis of the liver. Kerouac influenced and continues to influence writers, musicians, and spiritual seekers and finders and people who hunger to live freely. Kerouac wrote in words, sentences, paragraphs, novels, with a granularity and a quality of seeing that not only informs the reader of what he is seeing, but what he is knowing from the most fundamental part of his being. And I suppose every creative soul in the Culturium is doing that. Maybe that's the hallmark of the Culturium, the ability to communicate that fundamental essence of being in a creative masterpiece. That's what I'm getting anyway. Paula Marvelli shows how Kerouac expresses the hallmark of the Culturium through her review, and through extracts from Kerouac's book Lonesome Traveler. Published in 1960, Lonesome Traveler is a collection of journal entries about Kerouac's travels through the United States, Mexico, Morocco, the United Kingdom, and France. It's written in his inimitable, spontaneous prose style. In a brief article, Marvelli skillfully takes the reader from the solitary mountaintop where Kerouac studied the Buddhist Diamond Sutra, the challenges he met, and like a diamond herself, Paula cuts flawlessly to Kerouac's vision of coming back to the world. She quotes Lonesome Traveler, Kerouac writing, "I just lay on the mountain meadow side in the moonlight, head to the grass, and heard the silent recognition of my temporary woes. Yes, so to try to attain to nirvana when you're already there, to attain to the top of a mountain when you're already there and only have to say, thus, to stay in the nirvana bliss is all I have to do, you have to do, no effort, no path, really, no discipline, but just to know that all is empty and awake, a vision and a movie in God's universal mind, alaya, vijnana, and to stay more or less wisely in that. Because silence itself is the sound of diamonds which cut through anything, the sound of holy emptiness, the sound of extinction and bliss. That graveyard silence is like the slice of an infant's smile, the sound of eternity, of the blessedness sure to be believed, the sound of nothing ever happened except God." That was the writing of Jack Kerouac from Lonesome Traveler. Marvelli writes, "And thus Kerouac discovers that being on one's own is not a prerequisite to discovering peace of mind, and that the only way out of the desolation of daily life is to turn within, wherever one may be." Kerouac makes a promise to himself. He writes, "I decided that when I would go back to the world down there, I'd try to keep my mind clear in the midst of murky human ideas, smoking like factories on the horizon through which I could walk forward." Marvelli writing says, walking down the path, leading him back towards civilization, Kerouac pauses a while, taking stock one final time. "As I reached the bend in the trail where the shack would disappear and I would plunge down to the lake to meet the boat that would take me out and home, I turned and blessed Desolation Peak and the little pagoda on top and thanked them for the shelter and the lesson I'd been taught." Yeah, so that's Paula Marvelli with Jack Kerouac in the Culturium, or part of the sketch that she wrote. And I like what Kerouac said about staying, when I'm quoting him, more or less wisely in the knowing that all is empty and awake. I also like his saying that silence itself is the sound of nothing ever happened except God. I think it's important to feel Kerouac more than through his written words and our interpretation of them. So here's Kerouac reading some haikus that he wrote.
"In my medicine cabinet, the winter fly has died of old age. Well, here I am, 2 p.m. What day is it? The tree looks like a dog barking at heaven. Prayer beads on the holy book, my knees are cold. In the morning frost, the cats step slowly. No telegram today, only more leaves fell. Early morning yellow flowers, thinking about the drunkards of Mexico. The national scene, late afternoon sun in those trees. Nightfall, boy smashing dandelions with a stick. Holding up my purring cat to the moon, I sighed. August moon, oh, I got a boil on my thigh. Drunk as a hoot owl, writing letters by thunderstorm. All day long, wearing a hat that wasn't on my head. Beautiful young girls running up the library steps with shorts on. Crossing the football field, coming home from work, the lonely businessman. Useless, useless, heavy rain driving into the sea. After the shower, among the drenched roses, the bird thrashing in the bath. The little worm lowers itself from the roof by a self-shat thread. Snap your finger. Stop the world. Rain falls harder. Nightfall. Too dark to read the page. Too cold. In my medicine cabinet, the winter fly has died of old age. Following each other, my cats stop when it thunders. Spring evening, the two 18-year-old sisters. The postman is late. The toilet window is shining. Wash hung out by moonlight, Friday night in May. Empty baseball field, a robin hops along the bench. Blackbird. No! Bluebird! Branch, still jumping. My rumpled couch, the lady's voice next door. The bottoms of my shoes are clean from walking in the rain. Bee, why are you staring at me? I'm not a flower. The barn swimming in a sea of wind-blown leaves. Glowworm sleeping on this flower. Your light's on.
That's Jack Kerouac. And next I want to look at Paula Marvelli's presentation of Ansel Adams. Ansel Easton Adams lived from 1902 to 1984. He was an American photographer and environmentalist. And in Wikipedia it says his black and white landscape photographs of the American West, especially Yosemite National Park, have been widely reproduced on calendars, posters, and books. I think everyone knows the work of Ansel Adams, or at least knows of him. I want to talk a little bit more about Ansel Adams, and I'm going to be quoting fairly heavily from a biography on Ansel Adams written by William Turnage. The most important result of Adams' somewhat solitary and unmistakably different childhood was the joy that he found in nature, as evidenced by his taking long walks in the still, wild reaches of the Golden Gate. Nearly every day found him hiking the dunes or meandering along Lobos Creek down to Baker Beach or out to the very edge of the American continent. When Adams was 12, he taught himself to play the piano and read music. He became an accomplished musician. If Ansel Adams' love of nature was nurtured in the Golden Gate, his life was, in his words, colored and modulated by the great earth gesture of the Yosemite Sierra. He spent substantial time in Yosemite every year from 1916 at the age of about 14 until his death. Although Adams' transition from musician to photographer did not happen at once, it took a major turn in 1927. Adams' star rose rapidly in the early 30s, propelled in part by his ability and in part by his effusive energy and activity. Adams' energy and capacity for work were simply colossal, William Turnage writes. He often labored for 18 or more hours a day for days and weeks on end. His hyperkinetic existence was also fueled by alcohol, for which he had a particular fondness, and a constant whirl of social activity, friends and colleagues. As Beaumont Newhall writes, Ansel was a great party man and loved to entertain. He had a very dominating personality and would always be the center of attention. Adams described himself as a photographer, lecturer, writer. It would perhaps be more accurate to say that he was simply, indeed, compulsively a communicator. He endlessly traveled the country in pursuit of both the natural beauty he revered and photographed and the audiences he required. For Adams, the environmental issues of particular importance were Yosemite National Park, the national park system, and above all, the preservation of wilderness. He focused on what he termed the spiritual, emotional aspects of parks and wildernesses and relentlessly resisted the Park Service's resortism, which had led to the overdevelopment of the national parks and their domination by private concessionaires. But the range of issues in which Adams involved himself were encyclopedic. He fought for new parks and wilderness areas, for the Wilderness Act, for wild Alaska, and for his beloved Big Sur coast of Central California, for the mighty redwoods, for endangered sea lions and sea otters, and for clean air and water. An advocate of balanced, restrained use of resources, Adams also fought relentlessly against overbuilt highways, billboards, and all manner of environmental mendacity and short-sightedness. Yet he invariably treated his opponents with respect and courtesy. Though wilderness and the environment were his grand passions, photography was his calling, his raison d'etre. Adams never made a creative photograph specifically for environmental purposes. In 1977, he wrote to his publisher, "I know I shall be castigated by a large group of people today, but I was trained to assume that art related to the elusive quality of beauty, and that the purpose of art was concerned with the elevation of spirit." That sounds very much in line with the Culturium, the purpose of the Culturium. Paula Marvelli subtitled her article in Ansel Adams, "The Search for Beauty." She quotes him, "I believe the function of the artist in all media is a creation of affirmations, the search for and the realization of beauty." Let's hear Ansel Adams speak about what he does, and what follows is from a YouTube video that Paula includes in her article on Ansel Adams, and you can go to the Culturium and actually see Ansel Adams give this talk. Here's the audio portion.
I've been walking around these meadows for over 60 years. And it's hard to realize when you're young and without any apparent physical limitations, you just climbed all over these places. There isn't a ridge or a cliff here that you see that I haven't been on, been over. came here to Yosemite in 1916, and I was 14 years old. I came in June 30th, I think it was. I'm so bad for dates. I can't remember yesterday. I can see myself with a particular camera and a particular scene, see it in great detail, and you can smell the air, but I can't tell you what year it was. Everything is telescoped. Oh, I took snapshots then. Remember, I was a pianist. It took quite a while to really get into photography in a big way, but you can't help trying to record what you see. Most of the family and the friends would make such statements as, Ansel, dear, the camera cannot express the human soul. Do not give up the music. And my rejoinder would be, well, I don't think the camera can, but maybe the photographer could try. I can't verbalize on the internal meaning of pictures whatsoever. Some of my friends can at very mystical levels, but I prefer to say that if I feel something strongly, I would make a photograph that would be the equivalent of what I saw and felt. It's just interesting how you could think of a standard color photograph as automatic camera snapshot of the blue ocean and the rocks and everything, and you'd see something superficially, it would be colorful, but it might have no emotional meaning at all. It would have what we call scenery quality. And scenery quality is very different from the natural scene or from the internal scene. It's pompous to say vision, but when I'm ready to make a photograph, I think I quite obviously see in my mind's eye something that is not literally there in the true meaning of the word. I'm interested in expressing something which is built up from within rather than just extracted from without. But there I am trying to verbalize, and it never was very successful.
Ansel Adams said he made a mountain look how it feels. Perhaps all the artists do that to the object. They make the object subject one. Kerouac made the angst, the desolation, the sexuality, the fury of life look like how it feels. Just like we want to be in Ansel Adams' landscapes. That town in New Mexico he photographed with its eternal starkness and the moon in the sky. And we want to be taken by Kerouac's life. In both cases, we want to be dissolved into what contains the landscapes and the fury of living. In the same way, we want to know life through the films of Terrence Malick. Terrence Malick was born in 1943. He graduated from Harvard with a degree in philosophy. For his master's degree, he wrote on the worldviews of Kierkegaard, Wittgenstein, and Heidegger, all of whom expressed non-dual worldviews. He never completed his master's because of an argument, I guess, regarding his thesis. It's interesting to note that in his junior year at Harvard, on a trip abroad, Malick actually met Heidegger. About Wittgenstein, Greg Good writes, Wittgenstein's philosophy is deconstructive. It deconstructs belief in a subject-object model of language and of the world. That's pure non-duality. We can say from his academic background that Malick was exposed to non-dual thought. But it was Berit Ellingsen, the Norwegian writer of fiction who wrote about the non-duality communicated in Malick's movie The Thin Red Line. Ellingsen described several scenes non-dual in their theme in that movie. Her article could be accessed at luthar.com, Luthar.com. Paula Marvelli's article is entitled Terrence Malick, The Tree of Life. She calls it a visionary masterpiece of the beginnings of time. Paula quotes the driving theme of the film. This quotation is actually from the film. There are two ways through life, the way of nature and the way of grace. You have to choose which one you'll follow. Paula Marvelli reveals some deep feelings about the film. She writes, "There have only ever been a handful of instances where I have viewed cinematic perfection up on the big screen. Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker, Ingmar Bergman's Persona, Satyajit Ray's The Apu trilogy, but now I can add Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life to that elite list. A profoundly surrealistic contemplation of the nature of love and loss and the mysterious workings of time, consciousness, and the human condition. Understandably, the film won the illustrious Palme d'Or at the 2011 Cannes Film Festival." Paula Marvelli continues, writing, "The Tree of Life is told through Jack O'Brien, played by Sean Penn, a middle-aged corporate executive based in a firm of architects who is disenchanted with life and looking for some kind of meaning to his existence. Watching The Tree of Life is effectively akin to partaking in a religious experience, and I don't say that lightly," Paula writes. She says, "In nearly every scene, the sun, either directly or indirectly, peeping through foliage, clouds, the surface of the sea, features as the eternal still point around which the moving images oscillate, spiral, and turn. It is a motif that is carried right through to the very end of the film, reminding us of an omnipresent power forever watching over us, for better or worse." In the second sequence of the film, we are taken on a detour back to the origins of the universe. In a symphony of images, Kubrick-esque, including galaxies and our solar system, deserts and rainforests, even landscapes populated by dinosaurs, we are all the while beguiled by the operatic accompaniment of Zbigniew Preisner's Lacrimosa and the whispers of the main protagonists as to the meaning of life. Here is existence, Malick appears to be saying, in all its naked and pristine glory. Behold, gentle viewer, this is nothing less than the beatific vision, Paula Marvelli writes. And she continues, the next sequence brings us back to Texas, where a series of memories are presented in a non-linear tableau. This is the hardest part of the film, for there is no discernible narrative to latch onto, no surface meaning to the unfolding and seemingly non-existent plot. It is only through an act of mental vigilance, by abandoning any hope of understanding where the film is taking us, that we can rest in each and every scene as it arises, and thereby allow ourselves to be bathed in its metaphysical vision, and forced to consider our ultimately inconsequential position in the cosmos. That's Paula Marvelli writing. She continues, nevertheless, in spite of our insignificance, we still have a choice in the way we wish to live our lives. The way of nature, as embodied by Jack's father, authoritarian, self-centered, worldly, or the way of grace, embodied by Jack's mother, tender, self-sacrificing, divine. The sumptuousness of the colors and textures and sounds are overwhelming, Paula Marvelli writes. The overall aesthetic experience of The Tree of Life is exhausting. It would be fair to say that I wept pretty much consistently throughout the entire length of the film. Interestingly, these were often at points in the movie that prompted other people in the audience to walk out, whether through boredom, exasperation, or sheer bewilderment you can only imagine. The Tree of Life grand finale finishes at what appears to be the end of time itself, Marvelli writes. Jack finds himself walking behind his younger self in a desert, and then is transported to an ocean's shoreline along with other souls from his past. His mother is seen drifting elegantly along the sands, weaving her arms up towards the sun, the epitome of maternal finesse. And his brother and father are here too, assembled within the incorporeal throng. Nature and grace are finally reconciled, it would seem. All is forgiven and grace is restored. It is a majestic ending to a cinematic masterpiece. That's the writing of Paula Marvelli, as I noted during my reading of it. Terrence Malick doesn't do any interviews. I couldn't find any, but we hear the actors and producers talking about Malick's sensibilities in this press conference at Cannes, where The Tree of Life played.
Yes, good morning. Bruce Kirkland of the Toronto Sun and Sun Media. I have this sensation that perhaps Terrence Malick would rather be bird watching than filmmaking, and I share that sentiment. But nevertheless, given that he so rarely makes films and drags himself away from his relationship with nature, you have a feeling that it must be something special. So here we are with The Tree of Life. So I'm curious to hear from Brad Pitt and Jessica Chastain about working with a man who creates cinema more like a French impressionist than a normal, and I put normal in quotations, more linear, more conventional cinema. This must be an extraordinary experience, but also very different in terms of what he's expecting from both of you.
Yeah, I could go on far too long, and
you have 3 days to answer that.
About Terry's process, but it was very, very interesting with us. So the quick strokes were, our section of the story takes place in the 50s, and Terry started by renting the entire block and then dressing it as the 1950s, and therefore allowing us to walk outside, to go wherever we wanted. He would have a couple of kids jumping rope outside, and his idea is, even though he handed us a very dense script, he never wanted to, what he called hammer and tong a scene to as it's written. He was more interested in catching what was happening on the day. He's like a guy standing there with a big butterfly net and waiting for that moment of truth to go by. So the kids themselves were not given the script. They weren't allowed the script. They had a closet of clothes. They put on what they wanted to put on that day, and that's what we shot in. And we would do two takes, and Terry would also bring in, he would get up every morning and write for an hour, and he would give us pages in the morning, single-spaced, like 3 or 4 pages, and we kind of developed something out of that. And I think because of that is why the moments are fresh, because they're not preconceived in any way. The lighting, there was only one light in the house. Everything else was natural light, and one light over the table, and everything was handheld. And it was a pretty incredible experience. I don't know that I could do them all that way, because it's exhausting. But you see what you get. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, for me, it was a lot about giving up any idea of what I thought the plan might be for a scene or for a day that we were going to film. And it was all about capturing an accident.
Right.
And there are even scenes like we were shooting a grief section, and I remember I was watching Brad, and you were so good, and then there's this woodpecker going, speaking of bird calling. I was like, there's a woodpecker somewhere. But there's always ways to incorporate it, because even in the trailer, when you hear the voiceover, there are 2 ways through life, the way of nature and the way of grace. You hear a bird in the background, and that's actually from the set, me doing that voiceover, and he loved the bird. I
want to add one thing. He does what he calls torpedoing a scene.
Yes.
And the youngest child he called the torpedo. And on the first take, if we're having an argument, we'll be going at it and raising our voices and doing as you do. And the second take, unbeknownst to us, he would just send in Ty, the torpedo, and would sit down at the table, and suddenly it changed the whole tenor and tone of the scene. So this is something that would happen on a daily basis as well. Again, I can go on for a couple of days, so I'll cut it there.
On the most basic level, for those of us who have never met Mr. Malick or even seen him, does he laugh? Does he never laugh? Yeah. Does he talk? Does he never talk? Is he stern? Is he jovial? Does he eat? Does he like food?
Here's the thing. Yes, and he even goes to the bathroom. But he's quite jovial. He's incredibly sweet. He's laughing most of the day over at, when the dog would act up and bite one of us or something. I mean, he finds pleasure in the day, is my point. And I think this is the difference in great directors and good directors, is that he truly loves all his characters in a very, very passionate way, like respects them, appreciates them. And again, therein lies the difference. Yeah.
Question over there.
Hello, I'm Francisco Cáceres from Ticket in Central America. Congratulations on your movie. I have a question for Mr. Brad Pitt. You've talked about how I was working with Mr. Terrence Malick, but I would like to know how much did you get inspired by working with him? I would like to know, as a person and as an artist, how much inspiration did you get from him for the future of your career? Thank you.
It's a good question. It's changed everything I've done since, because you do find, I found in the past that the best moments, what I thought were the best moments, were not preconceived. They were not planned. They were the happy accident that Jessica was describing. So I've tried to, the things we've done since, to try to go more in that direction, and less on making an intense study when you're going into it, but then working with non-actors and trying to go off the script, see where what happens, where it takes you.
Okay, question here, then here. Go ahead.
Farah Nayeri from Bloomberg News. A question for Brad Pitt and anyone else who'd care to reply. We're just wondering about how religious Terrence Malick is. I mean, does he believe in God? Because there's the theme of creation and the mystery and Job and all of these very religious and even biblical themes run through this movie, which raises the question. So if you could speak about that as detailed a way as you can.
No, it's a good question as well. We had a lot of theological debates throughout the process. Really interesting. He's a very interesting man to talk to. Sarah probably knows him best. I would say that he's more of a spiritualist than a compartmentalized version of Christianity. He has a more universal viewpoint, in my opinion. Sarah, would you like to speak to that?
I mean, I think Terry's, he's interested in philosophy and all matters of the spirit, and he's extraordinarily educated in all religions and philosophies. So I think that deep interest speaks in all his work.
In that audio, you were listening to some of the actors and producers in Malick's film, The Tree of Life, being interviewed. Martin Sheen was interviewed on working with Terrence Malick in the movie Badlands, and Sheen said, we'd do a scene and he'd be as happy as Larry, and then he'd say, well, now, if you all just want to try something, go ahead. That was part of his technique, Martin Sheen said. One of his phrases was, just throw it all away, don't hang on to anything. And with those words, I'll move right on and look at one more contribution of Paula Marvelli's Culturium. The performing arts is one of the major categories of the Culturium. Paula Marvelli wrote a sketch on Upahar. Upahar was born in England. He spent a great part of his life in India. He resides for half the year in Tiruvannamalai, in the southernmost state of Tamil Nadu, near the ashram of the sage Ramana Maharshi, at the feet of the sacred mountain Arunachala. Upahar and his friends hold regular bhajan meetings. Bhajans is group singing in the Indian devotional tradition. And he holds these bhajans both in India and Europe, where he is based during the summer months in Italy. Upahar plays various instruments, including the bansuri, the Indian bamboo flute. Paula Marvelli is also a filmmaker, and she's filmed Upahar performing the poetry of Saint Kabir, translated by Rabindranath Tagore, in Ama's cave, which resides on a hill facing Mount Arunachala. Not much is known about Amma, except that she is a holy woman, revered by many, who lived in the cave for several years before vacating it to travel through Andhra Pradesh, leaving the cave empty. On the Culturium.com, there is a link to photos of Amma and the cave and how she functions in the capacity as a saint. Here is Upahar performing in Amama's cave, as recorded and filmed by Paula Marvelli.
The flute of the infinite is played without ceasing, and its sound is love. When love renounces all limits, it reaches truth. How widely the fragrance spreads. It has no end, nothing stands in its way. The form of this melody is bright like a million suns. Incomparably sounds the vina of the notes of truth. What is that flute whose music thrills me with joy? The flame burns without a lamp. The lotus blossoms without a root. Flowers bloom in clusters. The moonbird is devoted to the moon. With all its heart, the rainbird longs for the shower of rain. But to whose love does the lover dedicate his whole life? Have you not heard the tune which the unstruck music is playing? In the middle of the chamber, a harp of joy is gently and sweetly played. To hear it, there is nothing you need to renounce. If you have not drunk of the nectar of that one love, what does it matter if you purify yourself of all stains? The Qazi searches the words of the Quran and teaches others, but what use is it if his heart be not steeped in that love? The yogi dyes his clothes orange, but what use is it if he does not know the color of that love? subtle is the way of love. Therein there is no asking and no not asking. There one loses oneself at the Lord's feet, immersed in the joy of the seeking, plunged in the deeps of love as the fish is in the water. The lover never hesitates to offer his head in the service of that love. Kabir says, whether I be in the temple or on the balcony, in the field or in the flower garden, I tell you truly that every moment my Lord is taking his delight in me.
That was Upahar performing the poetry of Saint Kabir, translated by Rabindranath Tagore in Amama's Cave, Mount Arunachala, Tiruvannamalai, in Tamil Nadu, India. It was filmed and recorded by Paula Marvelli and is taken from theculturium.com. That's my show on the Culturium, with a few strokes of her pen, a few well-chosen photographs, and audio and video clips. For each of her subjects, Marvelli takes the reader deep, quickly, like when you walk into a lake or the ocean and after a couple of steps, suddenly you realize the ground is gone and you're floating and you don't know where the bottom is, and there may as well be no bottom. And that's what Paula Marvelli does in her sketches. She takes you deep quickly. Thanks to Paula Marvelli for creating the Culturium and its contents, and for inspiring this edition of Non-Duality Talk. It's clear that to appreciate what we've talked about here, one has to seek out the source material. And it's not Kerouac's book, or Ansel Adams' photographs, or Terrence Malick's films, or The Cave where Upahar played the flute. None of that is the source material. It only points to it. This has been Non-Duality Talk. Thank you for listening. Be sure to visit theculturium.com. I'm Jerry Katz.
It's been like